Hello. Hopefully you can hear me or see me and see me. That'd be good as well. The way that this particular software works is that you can pop a comment in for me to see, but unless you put your name against it, I won't actually know who's saying it. So it will just be like an anonymous post. But you can feel free to do that or to pop your name on it as well. So we are going to go ahead and get started. I'm just going to check and see that everything is working properly. I can't see that. Yep. I'm here. I'm here. So, okay, so I think people can see me, so it's all good. All right, so let's get started. So, what I really wanted to do with this particular coaching session is talk about the aspirational beauty standard and how it's impossible, how it affects our lives, where it came from, the history of it, and what we can do about it to take control over it. So, first of all, I wanted to give a little bit of history. The aspirational beauty standard is basically whatever mainstream culture considers beauty to be. And as we know, over time, that changes. So I just wanted to give a little bit of information about what has come before us. It is pretty interesting, and I've done a little bit of research on it. So, as far as we know, the beauty standard began as far back as the Stone Age. And there was an artwork found, and it was called the Venus of Willendorf. And this statue, which you can see in my slide there on the top left, is a statue that features large breasts, hips, and stomach. And scientists figure that this was probably used for rituals surrounding fertility, femininity, and eroticism. And since that time, art and media have been used to uphold the aspirational beauty standard in each time period that they've been. And it really varies greatly depending on what's happening in the world at that time. So in ancient Egypt, women were encouraged to be independent and beautiful. Ancient Egyptian society promoted a sex-positive environment where premarital sex was entirely acceptable and women could divorce their husbands without shame. To me, this sounds like the most amazing time in history, and if I could go back there, I definitely would. Ancient Egyptians have been credited with the development of cosmetics, and beauty was often regarded as a sign of holiness. The act of applying the cosmetics, done both when people were alive and when they were dead, was thought to have magical and spiritual purposes, and that was for both men and women. Next, we have ancient Greece, and this is quite interesting because this is where the male form was worshipped. And they went so far as to proclaim that women's bodies were disfigured versions of men's. In this time period, men faced a much higher beauty standard and perfection than women. And natural beauty for women was chastity and purity. So it was very much around not wearing too much makeup, not really wearing any jewelry, because if you did, as a woman, you were seen as being seductive and manipulative. So the Roman men liked their women with light complexions, smooth skin, minimal body hair, long eyelashes, all of those types of things. After that, we've got the Han Dynasty in China. So this is where you might already know, but small feet was an aspect of Chinese beauty that's continued for hundreds of years. And during this time, the Chinese culture favored slim women with long black hair, white teeth, and red lips. And historically, Chinese people have favored women who are ultra feminine, ultra feminine, I can't even say it, but big eyes, a tall nose, a small frame, and of course, a fair complexion. Whether it's for a man or a woman, really, those are the most important factors when it comes to Chinese beauty standards. Throughout history, a small face with a pointy chin has been the hallmark of beauty for most Chinese women. Then moving on to the Italian Renaissance, it was the wife's duty to reflect her husband's status during that time, both in behaviour and her appearance. So a very full body, light hair and light skin were all thought of as being superior indications of beauty. Then we move on to Victorian England, and this was the age of the corset. In this time period, women cinched in their waists with tight-fitting undergarments to give the perception of the desirable hourglass figure. So then moving on to the 1920s, when they had what was known as the flappers, who had quite an androgynous look. They wore bras that flattened their chest. They wore clothing that gave them the look of not having any curves whatsoever. Women cut their hair off, which was one of the first times having short hair was looked at as being beautiful, because usually in a lot of cultures, particularly European ones, long hair has always been the desirable beauty standard. So after that, we moved on to the golden age of Hollywood. In this era, the ideal woman is described as having curves, an hourglass figure, large breasts, and a slim waist. After that, we had the hippies with flower power, and this is when women looked willowy and thin. They had long, slim legs, and they had quite an adolescent physique. And then the 80s, which is when my experience with all of this starts, it brought about an exercise crazed phenomenon. So workout videos were all the rage, and they were encouraging women to be thin but also fit. And this era actually saw an upswing in anorexia, and a lot of experts think that that's caused by the widespread obsession with exercise that was going on at that time. In the 90s, there was heroin chic, and so the ideal body time in that period was waifish, extremely thin, translucent skin, and being androgynous. And today, our current beauty standards for women include a flat stomach, being healthy skinny, large breasts and butt, and a thigh gap. So as unfortunate as it is, Kim Kardashian is the poster woman of an ideal beauty standard for the modern woman, and Chris Hemsworth for men. So strong and masculine and muscly. So it really produces a paradox. You know, women are expected to be skinny, but not too skinny, with large breasts and a big butt while having a flat stomach. And most of us know that those proportions aren't actually natural. So what I took from that research is that every culture and every generation has an aspirational beauty ideal. And what I've shown here is a very European perspective on beauty standards, because that's been my experience, and I'm not in a position to speak for cultures that I'm not part of. What it does show us that at some time in history, our natural body shape has been considered beautiful. But what it also tells us, for most of us, if we weren't born in the right era, then we didn't meet the societal beauty standards. I shared a really great post recently that was entitled "Why Fat Isn't a Feeling." You know, the word fat is an adjective. It's a literal definition, is a natural oily substance occurring in animal bodies, especially when deposited as a layer under the skin or around certain organs. But we really use this word to describe our feelings. We say that we feel fat. And the emotions that we're often trying to express are things like anxiety, shame, guilt, and frustration about our bodies. When we use the phrase, we realign ourselves back with the preoccupation of eating, shape, weight, and linking all of that to our worth. So I personally think it's a great idea to stop saying I'm feeling fat and change that word to the emotion that you're actually feeling. So, excuse me, society really has a strong push for men and women, you know, starting off when they're little boys and girls. Society pushes girls to be pretty and happy and calm and generous and attentive to the needs of others, whereas boys are pushed to be ambitious, strong, infallible, and competitive. And both of those things put forth a look that idolizes what the best should look like. So generally speaking, women being smaller and men being bigger. So moving on, I'd really like to talk about some of the problems that have been caused by this aspirational beauty standard. Um, what the biggest takeaway for me in doing the research, and it's something that really struck home for me, is that what we do when we come across these ideal beauty standards is we compare ourselves. Everybody knows that it's something that it's very hard not to do. But what this produces inside us is a chronic low level underlying of stress. So all of this comparison is us telling ourselves that we aren't good enough. I do have some statistics here that I've looked up, and it is mostly about weight, although not all of the idealistic beauty standards are about weight. There is a bit more to it, but I find these statistics quite startling. So by age 6, nearly 50% of girls are worried about being too fat. And by 11, it's 2/3 of them. By the end of adolescence, nearly all girls will have engaged in some sort of weight control behaviour, and 44% practice unhealthy weight control behaviours. So to me, that's quite startling. We think as a society that we've moved on a little bit from some of those expectations, but those statistics show us that not so much. And I have my own daughter who at around age 7, started noticing that she felt like she had a stomach that didn't fit in with what she was seeing in media. And, I had to sit her down and explain to her that women are supposed to have fat on their stomachs. It's there to protect their reproductive organs. And it's not only women that are subject to this. More and more pressure has been put on men for the same type of things. So about 1 in 3 people struggling with an eating disorder is male, and that includes, all the things like binge eating, purging, laxative abuse, and fasting for weight loss. And it's nearly as common with men as it is with women. But the problem is, due to cultural bias and the way that we tell men that they have to be masculine and they have to take control, they're much less likely than women to go and get treatment for an eating disorder. I talked before about Chris Hemsworth being like the ideal male body type, and a lot of men really subscribe to that. And images in the media really sort of come along and they show that this is, more and more common. I don't know about you, but, I definitely see a lot more men in the media who are a lot more obsessed with bodybuilding, being in the gym and drinking liters and liters of protein shakes and spending heaps of money on supplements that sort of in any other time in my life. We're told lots of, unhealthy things by society and even our parents as we're growing older. Things like, eat everything on your plate, but then there's, the context of, well, don't get fat, but eat everything that we give you. And of course, Kate Moss's lovely saying that just sort of took off around the world, which is nothing tastes as good as being thin. But, actually nothing tastes as good as really good food. And we actually live in a culture where we ask ourselves, sometimes on a daily basis, have I been good enough to deserve food? Have I done the things I need to be able to eat the way I want? Am I beautiful enough to deserve love? And what we don't realize is that these are actually the basic rights of everybody. We don't have to be good to have them. We deserve them naturally. And we know already that businesses profit from selling an unrealistic aspirational beauty standard. We feel that we've got to conform, but the products are designed to be ineffective to achieve that ideal. So we keep going back and it creates a vicious circle. So basically, I guess what I'm trying to communicate here is that the game is rigged. We're being gaslit. We feel judgment towards people who don't conform to the aspirational ideal. We feel envious and contemptuous towards people that do. and we're self-critical about falling short. So when we're feeling like that, there's no winning. And that's why we really need to take control back into our own hands. So what I want to do now is just have a look and see if anybody's put through some questions that I can comment on. So I can see here that someone's mentioned that small penises were idolized as larger ones were meant to be signs of barbarianism and not being enlightened. That's really quite interesting. And I know definitely for men, genital size it falls under the aspirational beauty standard. So that's really interesting. And I can see here that Jason said that one of the best lessons I ever did on this topic was a girl at school to get a whole bunch of photos of attractive men from all over the world and compare who we all thought was attractive. And there was girls from Manus Island and girls who grew up in Australia and girls who grew up in mainland China and Hong Kong and Taiwan. And all of us did not agree on what any version of traditionally attractive was, and that they all thought that Jason Momoa was too much like a barbarian. I can't see the rest of that comment, unfortunately, but that is quite fascinating because we all have an ideal of what beauty is, and a lot of that, we have to admit, has come from the media without us actually having much of a say in that. Okay, so what I want to have a look at now is, I'm just going to move over to here for a second. Okay, so something that I found in my research was really interesting. We're talking about culture and just how much of an influence that it has. So in the book Burnout, which is my favorite book at the moment, we talked about this in my last live stream, but there was this piece in there about how in 1994 there was no TV in Fiji. It was introduced in 1995. And there was also no eating disorders in Fiji before 1995. So by 1998, 29% of girls had developed severe eating disorder symptoms, and 13% of those developed those symptoms within 1 month of watching TV. So everything in the media is aimed at telling you that you don't meet the current ideal beauty standard. And I think that that's something that's really important to remember. Something else that I've been reading about recently and that was quite an eye-opener for me is that health and beauty and weight have been mistakenly linked. So the BMI is an absolute myth. A panel of 9 people developed the BMI scale, and 7 of those people were employed by weight loss organizations who had an economic interest in people losing weight. People who are labelled overweight by BMI standards are actually in a lower health risk than people in any other category. Morbidity is linked to those in the category of underweight the most. And so what I'd like to do is share with you, I hope you can see the slide here, but this is a picture that my friend has given me permission to share with you. So you can see here in these statistics that she, according to a BMI scale, she's in the obese category. Looking at her photos there, nobody in their right mind would say that she's obese. So the problem with the BMI scale is it doesn't take a lot of things into consideration, like muscle weight. And for my friend here, that's a lot of, what her weight comes from. None of it is actually fat. So what's really important is to remember that weight and health aren't the same thing. And my same friend was telling me that she was dealing with a life insurance company who offer a health sense discount based on your BMI. So if it's between 19 and 28, I think it was, you qualify for an immediate discount. That doesn't matter if you smoke. It doesn't matter if you drink copious amounts of alcohol. As long as you fall into that category, you'll immediately get a discount, which seems really quite ridiculous. So what I sort of really want to get across here is that our culture judges people who they say are fat as being lazy and selfish. And none of this is true. You know, what people find when they get older is that they gain weight gradually, and that's pretty natural. And what happens as well is we have what's called a defended weight. So, like people who are naturally early birds or naturally night owls, we have a natural weight. And for people who go through, crash diets and yo-yo dieting and things like that, what they find is inevitably they go back to that defended weight because that's where their body naturally wants to be. So as I said, I'd love you to put in any questions or comments that you may have. I can't see, who says what. So if you want to pop your name on that, that would be amazing. Excuse me. And so moving on to our next area is, I guess, what can we do about it? So I want to say first that we have come a long way. There has been a big shift in consciousness about a lot of these issues. Pinpointing the exact moment in history where women started to turn their backs on these expectations is really difficult. But from where I sit, I think it kind of started in the 70s, but really wasn't heard on a cultural level until the early 2000s. The shift needs to continue. And what we really need to understand now more than ever is that we have the ability to control it. We have the power to control social media, which is the biggest influencer of aspirational beauty standards. Back in the old days, in the Renaissance days, it would be works of art showing us what beauty looked like. But now it's every time we turn on TV or look at our phones. And that low level stress of comparison is still there and it's still growing. All right, so what I've got next is something that I really believe will make a difference. And as you can tell, I hope, it's something that I'm really, really passionate about. So the first thing I want to say is a quote from Naomi Wolf. Don't know if you know who that is, but she wrote an amazing book back in I think it was the 80s, maybe early 90s, I'm not quite sure, called The Beauty Myth. She said that women are being destroyed physically and being depleted psychologically. If we are to free ourselves from the dead weight that has once again been made out of femaleness, it is not ballots or placards or lobbyists that women will need first. It is a new way to see. And that's something that resonated with me because what I talked about before is not only do we feel like we have to comply to these beauty standards, we also, in a way, feel forced to judge others on them as well. So what my goal would really be is for us to just accept our bodies and for everybody else to accept our bodies and for us to accept everybody else's bodies. But that doesn't sort of happen overnight. So as I said, there are a few things that you can do, and I have listed them down here on my slide, which I can't actually see. So I'm just trying to pretend that I can remember what I wrote down. One of the things that sneaks up on people is the amount of beauty aspirational influences that they have in their social media. Without realizing it, we can tend to follow people that we want to look like, that we strive to be like, and they're not actually giving us anything in return except for this stress and comparison. So I did this quite a few years ago now, and for me back then, it was more around celebrities than it was around fitness influencers. But I went through my social media accounts and I deleted anything that had to do with celebrities. And it actually made such a difference to the way that I started seeing people without having that, the knowledge and the drama sort of shared with me all the time. A lot of that unconscious conditioning started to ease off. But I also believe what we can do is take a step further than that, because we are judgmental by nature and because we've been conditioned to be judgmental, the only way that we can lose those judgments is to actually expose ourselves to the things that make us uncomfortable. So it might be that people that you term being overweight is something that makes you feel uncomfortable. It might be women who are older is something that you're scared of. What I want you to do is, once you've removed all of those influencers who are giving you nothing by their aspirational beauty standards, is to start adding accounts of these type of people and these type of people who are actually doing something. So a really good example of that is Lindy West. You can go and look her up, but she's someone who's out there making a difference. Throw out the scales. I don't weigh myself unless the doctor makes me, basically. And also, going back to our live stream from last time when we talked about completing the stress cycle, that's really what exercise should be about. So, engage in physical activity for hormone release, for competition, and for stress release, rather than for, changing the way that your body looks. If you ask your body what it wants or what it needs, and you listen really quietly, it will actually tell you. Depriving yourself of sleep or food or love isn't what your body needs. And, I'd really love it if we could get the hashtag going of Smash on the Authentic Self Group page. If you want to take a photo of yourself, without complying to aspirational beauty standards or something like that, that would be amazing. So I want to make sure that I share with you the references that I've looked at for research for this live stream. There's so much information out there, obviously, and this is just a little tiny slice of the pie, but it was something that was really important for me to share with you guys. And also, if you're interested, then you can always look me up at ninthkoi.com. I have a challenge that I'm running, 5-day courage challenge, which is designed to get people out of their comfort zones in life. And you can join that. That's a free mini course. So thank you so much for your time. If you do, as I said, if you do have any questions, please let me know. You can always email me privately at ninthkoi@gmail.com. But thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.